only certified domestic violence program in Winnebago and Boone counties, serving victims of violence in both counties. We have a 24-hour hotline that is operational 24/7, 365 days a year, and that number you'll see on that first slide, 815-962-6102. Thank you. As I said, it's 24 hours operational. Anyone can reach out to us and somebody will be on the other end of that phone for you. Next slide. The mission of Remedies is very simple. We're a health and human services agency. We help adults and their children deal with problems arising from substance abuse or domestic violence. I am the program director over our domestic violence services. We currently have an operational shelter. Oh, next slide, please. Operational shelter, that emergency shelter for victims of violence that are immediately fleeing an abusive situation. Because of COVID, of course, we've had to make some changes to our shelter. We were a 62-bed capacity, and that has changed to 16 households. We have 16 bedrooms and 16 bathrooms. So there's no commingling of clients or residents in the shelter. They all have their own private spaces. In addition to the shelter and the 24-hour hotline, we have advocates that can provide advocacy within the shelter, helping people get their important documents. Sometimes people, when they flee, don't have vital records, they don't have social security cards, birth certificates, those kinds of things. So we have advocates that will help people obtain those things that they need in order to get into housing and get jobs and other things that they need. In addition to shelter services, we also provide advocacy services in Winnebago or in Boone County. We have an office there, and we have an adult advocate and a children's advocate that can work with clients and meet their needs, providing individual support as they need them. We also have people that work at the Winnebago County Courthouse. So we have legal advocates that are based out of there that can help with orders of protection, helping people fill out that paperwork, whether that's virtual or in person. Because of COVID, the Winnebago County Courthouse and the Boone County Courthouse went virtual for a period of time, and Winnebago County is still providing some of those services. People can access those services even from their home. So if they want to file an order of protection and don't want to leave their home, they can do that through the Winnebago County Courthouse webpage. If you have any questions about it, you can always contact our legal advocates and they can walk the person through that process. Then it gets filed with the clerk's office, and then the clerk can set up a virtual hearing and they can determine whether or not that order of protection is going to be granted or not. We also, with legal advocacy, can do it in person at the courthouse, so people can come in. We're doing that safely, maintaining 6 feet of social distancing, and of course our courthouses are requiring that people wear masks throughout the building. We can then also go with the person to file the OP with the clerk's office and then wait with them while they're waiting for a judge to hear that order of protection. So it's kind of a wraparound service there that continues with the person through that whole process, which of course can be very daunting. In addition to that, we also follow up with people in legal advocacy. So after the emergency order of protection is granted, it's usually granted for 14 days, and then you have to come back to court that's one of the only things in our courthouse that is done ex parte. So you can grant that, you can file that order of protection and the other party doesn't have to be there, but after the 14 days, the other party has the right to come and say whether or not they believe the order of protection is necessary. Our staff continue to follow up with that order of protection beyond that initial 14 days. So we will be there for the plenary hearing. We will be there for any other continuances that happen so that the person filing the order doesn't have to feel alone. We also have an advocate that works at the Criminal Justice Center. She is there helping victims of violence who maybe their partner has had a police report called on them. And so she's able to contact the victim within 24 hours and talk to them about the process and talk them through the process and offer our services to them if they choose to receive them. In addition to those services, we are also doing individual advocacy, and right now most of that is done via telephone. So we do it telephonically. If somebody really feels that they need to come in person for those services, we are providing those services in person, safely social distancing 6 feet apart, but we're giving survivors the choice as to whether or not they want to come in and receive those services, or if via phone works for them better. When COVID came and doing that, we had some of our advocates working later shifts, and we realized that was kind of beneficial to some of our clients. And so that is something that we are going to continue. We will have a second shift advocate on staff that can help people with those later evening appointments if they want to do those either in person or via telephone. At this time, we are not providing support groups. We're just not able to do it safely, social distancing. We are looking into some ideas for maybe some virtual stuff down the road. But as of right now, all of our services we're trying to provide individually. Unless you are residing within shelter, we do offer support group services in shelter if clients choose to access those. So that is something that we offer for shelter residents, because we do understand that maybe their needs are greater at this moment in time related to finding housing, finding a job, and receiving other kinds of support. In addition to our adult services, we also offer children's services. So right now, some of that is looking telephonically as well. Children over the age of 12, of course, always have the option to choose whether or not, how they want their services to look for them. And so we try to honor that the best way we can. We have some doing that via telephone, some choosing to do that in person. And then we also offer children's services to all of the children within our shelter. So while their parents are getting supportive services, children are receiving those services as well. And we've kind of tweaked and tailored some of our services to also include COVID-19 and discussions about that and how that makes children feel. We understand that this is a very scary time for them and a very unknown time for all of us. So we really try to work with the children and make sure that any questions that they have are answered, or any way that we can help them, we try to do so. In addition to those services, we have what is called the Lethality Assessment Program. That was a grant that was funded in November 2017. It is continuing through the end of September, and we've received word from the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department in Winnebago County that they will still be utilizing that program in some sort of way. So with the LAP program, when people reach out to the police for criminal, whether it's a domestic battery charge or a neighbor overhears something going on within the community and they make a phone call, the police come to the site, they determine who is the perpetrator, who is the victim, and then they ask a series of questions. And based on their answers to those questions, the victim, if they score high lethality or answer the questions that make it, that we know, right, based on this lethality assessment program, we know that people in their situation who've answered yes to certain questions have a higher risk of being killed. And so the police are able to, if the victim chooses, reach out to us, and then we're able to offer immediate services, talking about what we can do, whether that's working with them on an after hours order of protection, or helping them get down to the courthouse to get that order of protection, or accessing shelter services if they don't feel safe within their own home. That program has been really successful in the community. It has led us to serve many more people than we had served. We saw a really big increase in the services that we were providing. So we're hopeful that this program will continue into the future. We know that at least 1/3 of all police calls are domestic violence calls. And that statistic has probably been higher since we've been working with the lethality assessment program and getting more of those numbers. So we know that we still have a lot of work to do in reaching everybody who needs domestic violence services. The final program that we offer is our Partner Abuse Intervention Program. That is a program that is funded through the Winnebago County 17th Judicial Court District and the Probation Department. If somebody has been found guilty of domestic battery and they are put on probation and in Rockford and Winnebago County, they will automatically be referred to our Partner Abuse Intervention Program, which is a 26-week program for perpetrators meant to help them practice different tools, different coping skills, and understand that the behaviors that they are exhibiting are not healthy behaviors, and really working with them to change their belief systems. We firmly believe that perpetrators need to have that information and need to be held accountable for their actions in order to change their behaviors in the future. So these are the programs that we offer. All of our programs are free. All of our services are confidential. We are open 24 hours a day. So anybody that wants to reach out to us, whether that is for information for a client that you have, or if you want to refer a client to our services, we are able to provide those services as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. I didn't see any questions that came up at that point. So Erica, Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling.
Good morning. Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling provides 24-hour counseling for victims of sexual assault and abuse in Winnebago, Boone, and Ogle counties. And if you can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different services we provide. So one of those services is advocacy. And advocacy looks, we have different types of advocacy. So we have 24-hour medical advocacy for recent victims of sexual assault and abuse. We are still going to the hospital when a recent survivor presents there. Different hospitals are handling it a little bit differently, but our advocates are still available to go. We do have a 24-hour crisis line, and that's our number there, for clients and non-clients. So when a client calls into our 24-hour crisis line, they will be directed to the therapist, and a therapist will talk with them through their crisis. And also when non-clients call in, our advocates, our volunteer advocates, handle those calls and get them the referrals and information and support that they need. We provide legal advocacy, which is assistance and support through navigating the court process. The court process can be a pretty scary thing for survivors to have to go through, and so our legal advocate helps them to navigate that. She also helps with civil no contact orders. We provide individual advocacy, and what that typically looks like is with a valid release of information. Our therapists, generally therapists, make contact with other services. So these might be psychiatrists, medical doctors, other counselors, other agencies, to coordinate services and make services just better overall for our clients. We also provide institutional advocacy, and that's RSAC working on behalf of our agency to bring about a systemic change in our community. So for example, that might be us talking with hospital personnel about how to provide better treatment options for sexual assault survivors. Okay, next slide, please. Right, we also provide counseling. So we provide counseling for individuals, family, and group counseling. Right now, group counseling is on hold due to COVID. We just don't have the space in order to be able to do that safely. But we are providing individual services still for counseling. And we provide those in English and Spanish. We serve survivors and their significant others aged 3 to adult. And we also, just kind of an important note, is for those survivors that are 12 years old to 16, they are allowed by Illinois state law to have 8 sessions of counseling without parental consent. After those 8 sessions, there is some qualifying things by the state statute that says they can get more services if they meet those requirements. However, that has to be looked at individually. but otherwise they would have to have parental consent to go on. We, again, serve survivors and their significant others. So sometimes that's siblings, sometimes that's mom, a partner, and sometimes we've had friends come in because they just want to know how to support their loved one. And for our survivors, it doesn't matter if the assault happened a week ago, a year ago, or 30 years ago. We're ready to meet people and work with them whenever they're ready to come in. And we practice under a client-centered approach. And that's really important to know because, you know, this is a very vulnerable topic for people to talk about and to come into. And so it's really important that people know that they get to decide when they're ready to talk about the trauma. We don't ever push anyone to talk about anything that they're not ready to. We do services in office, and so we do have Boone, Winnebago, and Ogle County. We have offices in each of those counties. We are also starting soon, I think in the next week, going to be having an office at the Family Peace Center. And so that's an additional place where survivors can be met in person. We also do outreach services, so that includes us going into the schools and a lot of the local schools. So we have counselors who might reach out to us, and it's just more convenient to meet there, either because parents don't know or because of transportation issues. So we do provide services there. Thankfully, we are having some of the schools reach out to us, and that we are going to be able to, so far some of the schools, we're going to be able to be back in the schools despite COVID to meet with those survivors who do need that as an option. All of our services are free and confidential. So, and by confidential, we have kind of an extra layer of confidentiality in Illinois called absolute privilege. And that's a very special protection that we have in Illinois that I believe only 3 or 4 other states have in the United States. So it's a very strong protection for survivors, just to protect their information from being subpoenaed or released to places that they don't want it to be released to. We are offering different options due to COVID and for people's level of kind of what they feel is safe. We are doing some in-person counseling still. We are offering video counseling as an option also, and we are doing phone counseling. So, you know, the therapist and the client, when they're setting up those appointments, just talk about what feels like the safest and best option for them. And our intake process is pretty simple. So what we ask people to do is, you know, as you're talking to the people that you're meeting with, as you're talking to clients, is just to give our phone number to them and just tell them about our services and let them know that, you know, if they're ready for services, that they can call the 815-636-9811 number. And from 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday, that number is answered by our staff. And whoever answers the phone does a brief intake with them. And they can share as much or as little, but the intake is mostly demographic information, their name, their phone number, their address. They're asked very briefly about, you know, what's bringing them in for services. But again, if they're not ready to share that over the phone, they can just say, you know, I'll share that with the therapist when they call. So again, we're very careful about not pushing anyone to share anything that they're not ready to share yet. Okay, and then we do have, unfortunately, we do have a wait list. And that can vary. You know, we try to keep it as low as possible. For recent survivors of sexual assault and abuse, there always will be contacted within 2 days, 2 business days, in order to set up their first appointment. For those from Remedies and inpatient Rosecrans, those people we try to contact within a week. So, and those that wait time generally always stays the same. For those whose assault happened longer ago, you know, we try to keep the wait list as low as possible. But for example, right now it's at 3 weeks, but whenever I can, I try to assign those sooner than that. So, but that does change depending on how many intakes that we have waiting. Okay, I think that's everything for that slide. If you can go on to the next slide. And then we also provide community education. So we have school-based prevention programs. If any of you have children or were in school in the last, I think we've been in the schools for over 10 years, we do a presentation called Aaron's Law, and that is a law in the state of Illinois to provide education on sexual abuse and assault. And so we do provide that in Winnebago and Winnebago counties. We also do other presentations in the schools when asked on consent, sexual harassment. You know, we have a wide variety of topics that we talk about. We also go out to different community agencies. So we have done different programs like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. We do self-defense out in the community, different groups within the schools. We have talked to foster parents. You know, we really like to just go out and talk to whoever we can, you know, just to share about, you know, what we do here and just to educate on sexual abuse and assault. We offer information and referrals. So we have a lot of people that call in but just aren't sure, you know, if they qualify for our services, if other services are more appropriate. And so we just always encourage people, if you don't know, you know, just call us and, you know, we will get you put in the right direction if we're not the right ones. And we also offer professional trainings. So we go to, you know, different organizations around town. We provide sexual harassment trainings, which is now a law for that to be provided every year. And so that is something that we provide. And all of our services are free of charge. And I think that's really important for people to know, because so often people think, you know, the barriers of if their insurance would cover something, or if, you know, they can pay that copay or not. We never have a fee for any of our services. And I think that's especially important to know for counseling also, that people know that it's a free service and there's no limits on the time that they can come. And especially again for counseling, that sometimes people come for a time and then they take a break, but that they can always come back. And so if that's ever a barrier, if somebody says, well, I went there, but I left, and you know, you can always let them know that they can always come back for services here. For our community education programs, kind of in respect to COVID, again, we've had some schools calling us already to have us come in for the Aaron's Law presentations, which is wonderful. Some schools are asking for different ways, and so we are working to provide those in different ways. And the same would be true for any community organizations, professional trainings. You know, we can do Zoom meetings, we can do, you know, depending on the topic, we can do like a video training, or we can come in person if it's in a safe way. So we're always looking, obviously, at kind of how to keep things safe here and to keep our staff safe going out. And we do practice kind of all the safe practices here too. So, but to access any of our services, just call our main line at, that's listed on the PowerPoint, that 815-636-9811 number. And you're going to be connected to the appropriate person to help you best based on the questions that you have. Thank you.
All right, and you know, there was one question that maybe Erica and Casey can answer, and then going forward, are counseling services offered in Spanish or other languages?
At Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling, we do have a Spanish-speaking therapist, and so we do have those services. Any other language, we do provide, we would provide a translator, interpreter.
Yes, and for remedies, that's the same as well. We have a Spanish-speaking advocate, and then any other languages we use the language line for. So we're able to provide services to anybody.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have Kathy with Carrie Lynn Children's Center.
Good morning.
Hello.
The Carrie Lynn Center actually is what's called a Children's Advocacy Center. If you can just go ahead and go to the next slide. The short answer is that we coordinate child abuse investigations. That's the easiest description of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Before you see the list of our partners. We work with law enforcement and DCFS, the state's attorney's office, mental health providers like RSAC. We also have a specialized medical program called Merit, which I can talk a little bit more about later. But this is what we consider our multidisciplinary team. And we bring them all together as a part of this process. They are key players in the process. We have a protocol in place that all of them have agreed to and signed off on, that certain types of cases will be handled a certain way. And I can talk to you about a little bit more about the process and how that all works. If you could go to the next slide. The purpose of our services it's multifaceted. What used to happen before Children's Advocacy Centers existed is all of those partners that you saw listed on the previous slide would function independently during the investigation of an allegation of child sexual abuse or severe physical abuse. And children would often be interviewed multiple times, having to tell their story over and over again. And I think we can all agree that children should not be re-traumatized by the system's response to their allegation of abuse. So it made sense to bring everybody together at one time to work together and be a part of the process so that children are not having to be interviewed over and over again. Of course, we have a child-friendly environment. We have an old Victorian home that has been restored, and so it's very much a home-like environment when they come in, very comfortable and relaxed. As I already said, we work with all the investigative agencies to work together during the course of the investigation so that they're communicating with each other with the hopes that the investigation can move forward much more quickly, creating less of an impact on families if they don't need the services or don't need the intervention, but also providing strong intervention and comprehensive intervention in cases where they do need services. And then our professionals we provide training and we send them to trainings and we bring in trainings to make sure that the folks that are working with these families know what they're doing and how to talk to kids and understand the impact of abuse on children, so that they are making good decisions and certainly responding appropriately to children and their families as they go through the process. If you can go to the next slide, please. So some of the important details. So we take all child sex cases and all severe physical abuse cases. And when I say severe physical abuse, I mean, burns, breaks, all the way to child death. And then every child sex case that comes through the system comes to the center. All of our referrals can only come through law enforcement and DCFS. So a report, we're not investigators at the center. We simply support the investigation and provide support to the investigation and the investigators. So the investigators have to be involved. They're the ones that make the decisions about what's going to happen with the case. So the report has to be made either to law enforcement or DCFS. And based on that protocol that I mentioned earlier, they send the case then to us, depending on which agency or which entity gets it first. Then what we do is we make sure that, let's say we get the report from law enforcement, we get a police report from law enforcement, a report has been made about a child who's been allegedly abused. We will make sure that if necessary, if it's appropriate, the DCFS is called. and vice versa. If we get a report or a CANCE report, many of you are familiar with CANCE reports, which is the child abuse and neglect report that comes through DCFS. If we receive that first, then we take it to the law enforcement agency, the appropriate jurisdiction, and give it to them and hope for or ask for a detective to be assigned to the case. And then that becomes the team, the DCFS investigator, the detective that's assigned becomes the team, the investigative team, and then works together throughout the rest of the investigation. We serve both Winnebago and Boone counties. Our office is in Winnebago. We're right here in Rockford, but our Boone County partners come to the center for the services that we provide here at the center. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just starting a list of what we do. So as I said, in terms of intake, all of our referrals come through law enforcement and DCFS. That report comes in. I have an intake coordinator that makes sure that all the appropriate entities are involved and are aware of the case. And then the first thing that usually happens in an investigation, we take 0 to 17. So if the child is verbal and can answer questions and be a part of a conversation, then we would schedule that child for a forensic interview. I have 3 interviewers actually on staff, 3 trained interviewers that conduct the interview of the child on one side of a one-way mirror. You know, we were talking about COVID and the impact of COVID. We've been doing interviews since the start of COVID. We've not stopped. Obviously, these cases have to be investigated and there's no way to do that. Our referrals did really tank during April. There weren't as many reports being made, which we're all very concerned about, I know, but we never stopped doing these interviews. We try to limit the number of people here at the center. Team members are wearing masks, we're social distancing. We took one of our interview rooms and we turned it into what we call the COVID room, where we took all the comfy chairs out and moved in things that we can clean a little easier. And tried to make it as child friendly as possible, but still as safe as possible. But long-winded way of saying we never stopped doing interviews at the center. We've been doing interviews all along. On the other side of the one-way mirror is the team members, and our interviewers wear a little bug in the ear while they're doing the interview. They're very well trained. They have to go through a certain amount of training to even be able to do interviews at the center. But that microphone and bug in the ear allows the investigators to ask certain questions, have the interviewer ask certain questions. If there's things that maybe the interviewer might have missed, or a certain detail that law enforcement needs, and law enforcement and DCFS function very differently in terms of their needs and what they need from a disclosure from a child, but that allows for free communication and free flow for the child, so the child is not interrupted during the process. But our interviews, it's important to note that they are non-leading, they're non-threatening, they are not interrogative. We are not here to force children to tell us what happened. We don't want children to make disclosures when there are no disclosures to be made. The whole point of this process is to find out what happened if something happened. We don't want children disclosing abuse that didn't occur. We want, like I said, to focus our services on families that truly need our services. And so that was the idea behind doing it this way, that we could find out the children that truly needed the intervention, and the children that didn't have the intervention and could move forward. When the interview is happening, we make a decision at that point whether we're going to make a medical referral. We have a medical site here at the center. The Merit program is a specialized medical program that actually is located over at Rockford Health Physicians, over near Dr. Ray Davis, who some of you may know is a local pediatrician, is a child abuse expert in our community. We're very fortunate to have Ray, who's been a part of our medical program since 1992, and actually started our program, and has created now what's called the Merit program. It started at our center where he was just a volunteer doc seeing kids, and now Merit is its own standalone program that offers services beyond the Carrie Lynn Children's Center. They're serving other advocacy centers in the community and or in the area, all of Northern Illinois, in fact, and DCFS can make referrals to them too. But we would make a decision during the course of an interview. We don't want to refer kids for medical if they don't need a medical. We want to make really conscious decisions about what we're asking children to go through and as a part of this process. So we will make referrals where necessary, when necessary, to Merit. And Merit is, very specialized. They're working with children. That's what they specialize in. They know how to do these exams without hopefully re-traumatizing the child and creating a child-friendly environment. And the process is just wonderful. They've done a fantastic job. So they can either do the exam here or we can send them over to the Merit offices. Obviously, we're doing a criminal investigation when we're doing these interviews. We're a part of a criminal investigation. That's why law enforcement's involved. DCFS is involved looking at child safety. But one of the things we do look at is whether these cases are going to go to court. And as you all know, there's varying levels of court intervention. But if our cases are criminally charged, then we do have advocates that go to court with those families, work with the families through that process and take them through that process. And because we all know that can be another really long, overwhelming process and can go on for a really long time and can be really not terribly child friendly. So our advocates do try to help bridge that gap and make sure that the victims' rights are being honored and that prosecutors are doing what they need to do on behalf of children and families and getting them through that process, and all the way up to probably prepping them for testimony, because children in this community in Illinois have to testify. It doesn't matter that we DVD record these forensic interviews, and yes, the interviews are shown in court, but children still have to testify. And so that's part of what we try to do, is to prepare them for that and make sure that they are as prepared as they possibly can be to go through that process. And sometimes that takes a really long time, but that's what we work hard at doing. And we can have those court advocacy cases for a long time. They can be with the center for upwards of a couple of years sometimes. So we get to know those families pretty well. Next slide, please. Then we have a crisis intervention program. We do provide on-site crisis intervention counseling, very short-term counseling to children who need to get in right away to see somebody. And then we make generally long-term referrals, primarily to RSAC, where we send our families when they need to see somebody for a more longer term period. So our therapists, we have 2 therapists on staff. Our crisis intervention services are only offered and provided to children who come through the forensic interview process. But once a child has come through the center, it doesn't matter if they were 7 at the time of the interview and now they're 15 and they're having some issues. They can call us and we can either guide them towards other counseling options, or we can have our therapist check in with them. So once a Carrie Lynn client, always a Carrie Lynn client, kind of like what RSAC said, that, once you open that door, we're always here and always available. And then of course the mental health referrals that we're able to make to our partners in the community. And, in terms of COVID, like I said, we didn't close our doors. Staff stayed home for a little while and did a lot of remote working. Our crisis intervention therapists are not going into homes and not going into schools right now. We're seeing kids either virtually or some in office, some over the phone. It really depends on the family and what they're willing to do and what they need. Everybody is at different points. So with this whole COVID thing, so we want to honor whatever makes people feel comfortable. We do try to limit the number of people in the center at any given time. We're wearing masks, we're cleaning. We not too many people in the office at any given time. So we really are trying to keep it as socially distanced as possible. But otherwise we're open and we're here and centers or services are being provided. I think that's kind of it. The next slide, I think, is just my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kathy. And I don't currently see any questions, so we're gonna move ahead to Winnebago County CASA and Jillisa.
Thank you. So yes, Winnebago County CASA, we are located in the Juvenile Justice Building downtown, and we work with the judges. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Our mission statement is really basic. We advocate for abused and neglected children in the court system with the belief that every child has the right to a safe and permanent home. We were originally founded, we are a national organization with a local organization here in Winnebago County. We were originally founded in Seattle. The judge out there noticed on a case that he was making tough decisions about children's lives, but really didn't have a lot of information about the child. So he wanted somebody who did not have any ties to the case whatsoever, an unbiased ways to go out, align themselves with the child, and bring that story back to the courtroom so he can make a better and more informed decision on that child's life. Next slide, please. We provide advocacy for our children by the means of volunteers. Our volunteers are trained, they go through a 35-hour training that we provide to them. We are appointed by the judge in court. Once their training is complete, they're sworn in as an officer of the court. I'm so sorry if you guys can hear the announcement of court. Normally it's pretty muffled in my office, so I do apologize for that. That becomes an interruption. But getting back to it, they are sworn officers of the court after they complete their training. What our advocacy looks like is our volunteers, they're appointed to one family up to roughly about 4 children. After 4 children, that's when we'll put more than 2 advocates on a case to better serve them. But our advocates visit the child monthly. We try and be that one consistent person through the life of a child as they're going through the courtroom. A lot of times, there's multiple caseworkers, there's different foster homes, there's a lot of people in and out of that child's life, and sometimes it's just easier to have an adult to partner alongside of them that they can trust, that they can confide in, that they can bounce ideas off, something that just gives them a little bit of stability as they're navigating this process. And so our volunteers, they go out monthly and we're playing basketball, we're helping with homework, we're talking about how their day is, we're checking in on all their needs, but we're also following up with teachers. We're aligning ourselves with the caseworkers. If we're noticing any concerns, we're bringing it to the caseworkers. And our caseworkers, they do a phenomenal job in what they do. They have to serve the entire family. They're checking in with the parents and the children and the foster family, and they're providing services to everybody involved in the case. And so sometimes with them and their large caseload, not saying they're missing anything, because I don't think they really are, but when a CASA is appointed to a case, we're appointed to that family, that child, and that's it. And so when we bring concerns, we can notice concerns, we can get a little bit more information for that caseworker and pass that information along to them. So they can get more services. They can get the services that are more needed or more tailored to their needs. If there are concerns, we can move quicker, we can act quicker as a team. I just lost my train of thought. So outside of partnering with the caseworkers, we're also checking in with doctors if need be. We're checking in with other professionals. We work closely with the counselors if they are involved on the case. Granted, counselors really can't share information with us because of confidentiality, but we can share information with them. Because if our goal is to make sure that this child is set up for success, if there's any concerns or a traumatic event that happens, we want the counselor to know, because we want that counselor to help that child. So essentially, when a CASA is appointed to a case, we really enmesh ourselves into that child's life, and we advocate in all areas of the life. But our voice is strongest in the courtroom. As the GAL in court, the attorney that would typically be their representation represents us. So we write a report, everything that we have observed since the last court date, we put in a report, we submit it to court, all parties in court receive our report. And there's an opportunity for us to conference and talk with other attorneys and the caseworker and really game plan inside the courtroom. And our advocates are right there in the middle, bringing that child's voice to court outside of the report to really advocate for what they need. We can advance to the next slide. So directly, we're there for the child, but indirectly, because our CASAs are just community citizens, we all bring different life experiences to the table. So indirectly, we work with families and sharing community resources that are out there. the caseworker, they're doing a great job signing them up for all the services that they need to be signed up for. But sometimes in normal conversation, we may notice like, oh, or a family may forget that they can ask for a bus pass. It's like, oh, yeah, talk to your caseworker. That's an opportunity for you where you can access some of your services easier if that's a barrier for you. If they're noticing any other barriers, we like to talk about other ways that they can still achieve that same goal as long as it aligns with what the caseworker has to be successful. Because ideally, one of the first goals of court is for us to reunite families. We want families to come out stronger than what they did. Unfortunately, if that's not possible, then we'll look at other permanent options such as adoption or guardianship elsewhere. But we really want to bring our own experiences or our knowledge of the community and various resources to that family to make that a successful situation. You can go to the next slide. As far as COVID, initially what we saw with COVID was during quarantine, we had to stop in-person visits, which was really difficult for us because one of the things we do is every month we go inside that child's home to be able to observe how they're living, their room, some of those different things. So everything had to switch over to video and phone calls. Our advocates, they adjusted phenomenally. We did increase our visits. So on a minimum, our advocates visit a home at least monthly. That's at a minimum. Most of our advocates visit like 2-3 times a month, to be honest. But we did, with video and phone calls, we did increase it. Also, along with COVID, some of DCFS's practices had to change. So one of the things that was really paramount for some of our families was parent visits had to stop. If they were at supervised visits, that means a caseworker or case aide would also have to be present, and that wasn't a safe situation under COVID. So some of those visits had to stop. Some of our children really had a hard time wrapping their minds around it. So we really wanted to make sure that we were more present in their lives as just a sounding board, being that support. And so we did increase the amount of visits when it came to video and phone calls. Also during quarantine, it was emergency only in court. Court has now opened back up since we have opened back up, and some courtrooms even take advantage of being able to do Zoom court. So I believe Judge Martinez, every once in a while, he'll, if need be, they'll schedule a Zoom court. But we are back up and running. That's really not an issue as of now. If we ever do go back underneath quarantine, that just may be another thing we have to deal with. And kind of what happens when there's no court and it's only emergency court, we're able to check the progress and the status of how people are doing in their services for they're called permanency reviews. And that's when we're checking in, how are things going? And without those, sometimes it's hard to advance the case to the next stage or to the next level. So we were just seeing just like a lengthened time in care for some of the children that we serve. Another impact of COVID on us, we've noticed a decrease in being appointed to cases. During the time of quarantine, there's a reduction in hotline calls. I believe the last time I checked in with the state of Illinois and their communications with DCFS, there's an anticipated 20% increase in hotline calls now that school has started. Right before school started, Winnebago County, we had about 13 children in front of the juvenile justice court in abuse and neglect, which is crazy high. The last couple of years, it's been averaging around 11 to 1,200 children. So we're very concerned on what that looks like moving forward. Also, our training has affected our training as well. We've trained typically in person, or we'll do half online and half in person. With COVID, we've done exclusive online only training, and it honestly has been tremendous. It's been great because people have been able to train over their lunch hour or in the evening, and it's allowed us a little bit more flexibility. But we're also missing a group of the population that are not tech savvy who could also be great advocates for our children. So that's something I want to watch moving forward, just the number of people that we're actually bringing in and training. And then of course, just being nonprofits, just funding, missing our events, and just the decrease in funding, which I know we're all kind of dealing with. But hopefully that doesn't affect our services moving forward in the next couple of years. Because I would just hate for us to scale back. We're such in a situation of growth and expanding so we can serve more children. But that is it for me. Then, of course, just a quote on
Thank
children.
you. I just had a question. Can you clarify again, the judge appoints a CASA, but who can request one? Or is it strictly up to the judge if they think there needs to be a CASA in the case?
Anybody in the courtroom. Anybody in the courtroom can ask for a CASA. It can be a parent, a caseworker, foster parent, any of the attorneys, the judge herself, if she's like, this is a case that we need to appoint CASA. But anybody in the courtroom can bring that to the judge's attention. She'll position it to the attorneys and see if people agree, if they disagree. But ultimately, she'll make the final decision on whether or not a CASA will be appointed.
Great, thank you. Okay, and moving on now, the Family Peace Center and Sierra.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Sierra Kellen. I serve as the operations manager for the Rockford Family Peace Center. Go ahead and advance the slide, please. So the Family Peace Center opened on July 20th. We've been planning for about 2 years now with various partner agencies in the community that I will share at a later slide. But the Family Peace Center is a multi-agency, multidisciplinary, co-located service center, and we provide centralized intake process and then the coordinated services under one roof. So I'd like to clarify that the Family Peace Center isn't starting a new nonprofit agency to provide services, but we really are the coordinator of all of these great services we already have in the community coming together and working for the benefit of survivors and their children. So they can come to the Family Peace Center and get all of these services under one roof. The 5 victimization areas that we serve are domestic violence, sexual violence and abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, and trafficking. And then we are open as a center from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Our phone number is listed there, and a referral really is as easy as calling that main line, and then we can kind of take it from there and work with the survivor and figure out kind of what they need and if they're going to go forward with an intake. Next slide, please. So these are our partner agencies, obviously a wide variety. So we work with governmental and non-governmental partners. And the great thing about all of this collaboration is that the survivor has lots of options. He or she can decide what it is that they need, and we can talk with them about the various levels of confidentiality that each of our partners have and what that means for their information. And then they can make choices about who they want to see in order to help get them safe, get them the services they need, meet their goals, whatever those goals might be. So the Family Peace Center envisions a community where all people have hope and are safe and free from violence. And for our mission, we landed on led by the voices of survivors. Our mission is to collaboratively build a prosperous community by creating pathways to self-empowerment for survivors of domestic and sexual violence through integrated long-term services provided with kindness, dignity, and inclusivity. And so to that, that end, we really work with the survivor. I've had a lot of calls with other agencies in the community as we've been educating people about what we do, that ask about, what about, clients who are, unwilling to participate in services. And I would just remind people that this is a voluntary service. So what we provide is really survivor-centered. And so whatever that survivor is wanting is what we'll provide. We're not going to track that person down. It's really, the onus is on the survivor to call us, and then we can collaborate with that survivor in helping that person meet their goals, whatever those goals look like. So I won't list off all these partners, but they're there for you. And then if you're interested in our brochure or our materials, we also have all of them listed on our brochures, and I'm happy to provide your agency or your group a packet of those to put, in your front desk, or, if you have a brochure wall, we can add ours to the list. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the actual services that we provide. So we do the centralized intake process. When a survivor comes to the Family Peace Center or in this instance, often we're having survivors call the center because of COVID. We're sitting with them and doing a centralized intake process. So we're learning about who they are and who the person who is perpetrating the violence or abuse against them, and then really kind of understanding what it is that they're hoping the Family Peace Center can do for them. So oftentimes a survivor has experienced abuse across their lifetime, and so we could talk about, you know, a lot of violence and abuse that's gone on. And so then we really want to boil it down with the survivor to say, what is it that you're hoping that the Family Peace Center can assist you with? And then we sort of triage those needs. They may want multiple things in the course of their kind of healing and safety process. So for them, it might be, right now, I just really need an order of protection, or I need to file a police report, or I need to get shelter immediately. And so we're indicating on our form kind of which partner agencies we're going to suggest that they might work with to get to those end goals. And then once they identify those needs, we say to them, okay, so if you're looking for shelter, we might refer you to Remedies, our domestic violence shelter, or we might have you work with Human Services to work on getting you maybe transitional housing or more permanent housing. You know, this is the implications for your information if you share, you know, your information with them. Remedies obviously has very strict confidentiality, as does Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling. Some of our other partner agencies might be government agencies who can't as more completely protect your information. And this is what that may mean for your safety. And then we help the survivor sort of make those decisions with all of the information in front of him or her, and then we make the referral. So we always do a release of information. We are a nonprofit agency, and we are, as a nonprofit agency, able to protect their information. But if we're going to share that information, we want to make sure that that's informed. So we go through the release of information process with the client at that time and explain to them the implications for sharing their information. All of those, in order to be VAWA compliant, are time limited. They have to be very specific and written on the form. And so we do use DocuSign with clients that we might be working with over the phone or over Zoom. And then we can always be creative. If they don't have access to a computer, it may just be explaining to them, you might need to give a little bit extra information to the next partner agency because I'm not able to release your information, but we just want to get you to safety right away. So we're just going to make this referral right now, and then you're going to share your information as you'd like to share it. And then within the context of that relationship we've established with the client, we're, you know, kind of doing that warm handoff with any of our partner agencies. And then those partner agencies are sort of taking it from there. They're providing their own services, working within their own policies and procedures around their own confidentiality limitations. But the Family Peace Center will also follow up with survivors if they consent to have follow-up and kind of check in with them, see how they're doing. Obviously, we just opened our doors, you know, on July 20th. So we're almost to 2 months now. We've served over 50 survivors as clients and provided sort of guidance and referral to others that may not have been looking to completely engage in our services, but just kind of wanted, you know, to know what we were about. So we're definitely picking up the pace as people are finding out about us in the community. But the goal post-COVID is to provide much more in terms of support groups and community for survivors. So the case management piece is not just checking in with survivors, but also inviting them to participate in a community. We know that survivors have often been isolated by their abusers. And so part of it is welcoming them into a space where they can come. They can come and use the internet here at the center if they need to get on the computer, if they want to be in a support group with other survivors who have experienced similar situations, just to kind of have that camaraderie. They're welcome to do that. And then we're working with the business community to think long-term about financial literacy, creating job opportunities, helping survivors establish skills so that they can be self-sufficient long-term. So similar to many of the other partner agencies on the presentation panel today, we don't ever close out a file. So a survivor might become inactive if they, aren't engaging in services regularly, but in the event that, something comes up 6 months later and they want to come back down to the center, we already have their file and are ready to re-engage them in the variety of services they might be interested in. So all of these services provided aren't necessarily Family Peace Center staff providing these services, but we rely on our various partner agencies to give all of this in one location. So we have Prairie State Legal Services able to provide legal services in addition to NIU's Zeke Georgie Legal Clinic through their College of Law. So, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of getting advice. Other times they want to be connected to mental health assessment, to counseling, to other supportive services. And so we work with family counseling services and Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling and Remedies. And OSF actually was just awarded a trauma recovery center grant. And so they're going to put a clinician here. And so we're really able to engage all of the best of these partner agencies in one place for survivors. And we do also through YSN, Children's Home and Aid, Carrie, Lynn, Children's Safe Harbor provide services for children and youth. And so similar to what Erica mentioned, survivors 12 and up can be seen here and then connected to services up to 8 sessions without parental consent. So if a survivor is experiencing teen dating violence or sexual violence, they can come here and we can connect them to the appropriate services so that they can get what they need. Next slide, please. Obviously, all of us are feeling the impact of COVID. So our hours of operation are limited to business hours at this time. So Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that all court holidays, all federal holidays, we are closed. But we will take appointments after hours. So if we have a survivor who says, I work until 5, but I really need assistance, we can set up a time and then assist with kind of scheduling staff to be here waiting for that person. So if they need it till 5:30 to get here, we can do that. We also assist with orders of protection, and we're working with the court now so that we can provide after hours emergency orders of protection through the Family Peace Center, in addition to Remedies being able to do that. So survivors who may need something, obviously we would still ask them to go to Remedies if it's like in the middle of the night, because Remedies is equipped for that with their 24-hour shelter and their hotline. But if it's, 5 o'clock and they need to get something, then we can always set up a time to make sure that can happen. And then, as I mentioned, we're doing much over the phone or over Zoom. So most survivors are calling us first, and then based on their needs, we're assessing if we can do what we need to do over the phone or via Zoom, or if it's safer for them to come down in person. Obviously, people are getting back to work now, but it was a very unsafe time for survivors, often trapped at home with their abuser who was no longer leaving and going to work. And so, maybe the survivor was asked to work from home, and so was her abuser or his abuser. And so as we're kind of coming out of that, we're starting to see people more willing to engage us in in-person services. So in the event that that's the safest option for that person, we're doing temperature checks, asking everyone to wear a mask, and then sanitizing any surface before and after we work with the survivor, and then maintaining a 6-foot distance. So we're kind of taking all the precautions. We've worked with the health department to make sure that we can do that safely, but our priority is to do much as we can virtually for the safety of everyone involved. And we're kind of learning as we go. Obviously, we'd like to provide much more community-oriented services to survivors here at the center. But we're definitely cognizant of needing to maintain social distancing. And so we're hoping to roll out many more kind of group-oriented services as we kind of grow and hopefully phase into a safer place, with a vaccine and hopefully COVID behind us one of these days. So we'll keep the community updated on kind of what we're providing. But at this time, we're providing those crisis services and then engaging people in services for as long as they need that. And I think, do I have one more slide, or is that it? I think that's it. Yeah, so I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, our services are very new. And we're always engaging with new partner agencies. So far we have about 20 partner agencies, and many others have engaged us to say, how does it make sense for us to refer back and forth? And how can the community be involved? I will say our volunteer opportunities do require a 40-hour domestic violence training. That first 20 hours is 20 hours online through the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and then 20 hours in person through Remedies Renewing Lives, one of our partner agencies. And so if you're interested in engaging with us as a volunteer for the safety of our clients, it is a pretty intensive process, and we do ask for at least a 6-month commitment. But if you're interested in engaging in that way, feel free to reach out to me and I can always coordinate kind of getting you started on that process. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sierra. Before we go to open questions, I just had a question for the panel. Do any of the agencies provide any sort of assistance with transportation for their clients?
Remedies has bus passes, and then we also, until the end of September, are able to utilize taxi services.
Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling also provides bus passes, as well as we do have a limited amount of gas cards for things especially like court.
If we have a family that can't get here for services, our partner agencies a lot of times will provide transportation, or my staff will help get people to court, but you know, generally speaking, we don't have bus passes or anything like that. We provide it ourselves.
Okay. Anyone else?
For the Family Peace Center, we also worked with RMTD to get bus passes. And then in an emergency situation, we can call upon our police and fire chaplains. Emphasis on an emergency. We don't use that as like a regular course of action because they're very busy with their current roles, but they have partnered with us to say, you know, if somebody really needs to get there, we can get them there. And then because law enforcement, both the Sheriff's Department and the Rockford Police Department are our partners, if they respond to a 911 call and that person needs to get here, they can certainly transport as part of kind of their process on patrol. And we will call upon them as needed, but knowing that they have lots of other things to respond to. Again, we only use that in emergency situations. We're also right on a bus line, comes right to the corner here on Main Street. So, you know, we intentionally chose a location that was readily accessible via public transportation.
Question that has come in for the panel. What is the first step a case manager should take if their participant notifies them of abuse going on in their life? So it sounds like we're talking about if there's current abuse.
I would say, oh, sorry. For remedies, we would ask them to encourage their client to reach out to us. All of our services are voluntary. So having said that, we cannot mandate people to receive services from us. And for our organization, we really feel that feel very strongly that it is clients' consent, right? Survivors' consent, survivors' free will to come and reach out for services. So always letting the client know or the survivor know that there are access to resources and giving them, again, our 24-hour hotline to reach out to, I think is the best way to do that. And we want the information from the client. We don't want, we want that person to be able to share what they feel comfortable sharing with us and not have that information come to us via a third party. You know, it's just client's consent.
In Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling, very similar to what Casey just said. And then I would just add on, if this is a child that is disclosing that there is abuse going on in the home, that the DCFS, you know, be that phone call also to work to that kind of that first step to keep the kids safe.
And if DCFS is unable to take the report, because of course DCFS will only take reports or limits their reporting to immediate caretakers, law enforcement can also be called and a report can be made to the local jurisdiction.
And in terms of the Family Peace Center, obviously many of these partner agencies are that are on the panel work with the Family Peace Center. And so we're happy to take that call Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and sort of triage from there kind of what the needs are and then make those referrals. Obviously anything related to sexual violence and abuse, we're getting them right to Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling. If you're not really sure what's going on, you know, we can always, you know, have that phone call with the survivor in order to kind of figure out what their needs are and what their goals are, and then make the appropriate referrals to the partner agencies. So we, you know, we're really designed to take the guesswork out of it, not only for survivors, but also for other community members who are concerned about someone. So we tell people, if you don't know, that's okay. We can help kind of sort that out, and then hopefully work with that person to get them what they need.
And just to second what Sierra said, we get those kind of calls all the time too. We call them cold calls. You know, when I said referrals only come from law enforcement and DCFS, we get calls from the community all the time. What do? I have a child. I think my neighbor, I think my child. Can you do an interview? And, you know, some of those kind of questions, and we're able to guide them on how that works, who to call and how to make a report. And so if you ever need direction or guidance, we're here too.
If I can just piggyback off, just kind of Kathy jogged my memory. We oftentimes have people who call in that, you know, I'm seeing some signs in my child. I think they might have been sexually abused. You know, I think what's important for you know, everyone to know is that, you know, we don't do any investigation, and we can only accept clients who have some kind of disclosure. So it does not have to have been through DCFS. It does not have to have been founded by DCFS, charged by the police or anything like that, but just some kind of disclosure. So, you know, as long as, you know, the child says it happened, we take that as that's what happened, and we can work with that person. But if the child has never disclosed, no one's seen the abuse or anything like that, then I talk with the parent or the guardian, whoever's calling in, about having good, bad, secret touch talks with kids, and not investigating, but just educating them about what that is, educating the child about what that is, and I walk them through kind of how to have that talk. And then sometimes what happens, the child will disclose that something happened. But always to emphasize to the child, you know, if something like that happens, it's never your fault, and you know, you want to tell a trusted adult so we can get everybody some help.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up on that. Which of the agencies on the panel are mandated reporters? Staff are mandated reporters. I see 1, 2, 3.
We are as well.
Remedies is as well.
Okay, and I think it's important for the case managers to understand when that resource is given, that, you know, they fall under the category of those that have to report children to DCFS. Though I know that RSAC with an adult does not need to report to the police. They take that information, and we do not, for adults, make any calls to police for 18 and up, or excuse me, 17 and up. Okay, we have a couple of questions. In the world of COVID, where resources are tight, how do we ensure the most coordinated care and streamlined services, making the most of the dollars available in our community? Oh, that's an easy question, Pam. Any thoughts from our panel? Casey, I don't know if you're...
Oh, sorry. What's the question?
In the world of COVID, where resources are tight, how do we ensure the most coordinated care and streamlined services, making the most of the dollars that are available in our community?
Ooh.
Just to speak for Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling, we've been very fortunate in that, besides for safety reasons, we haven't had to limit our services for funding yet, and hopefully we won't have to. So our services, we're able to provide them the same, as much as usual, just a little bit different context, whether it's phone, video, and some in person. So I don't know if that answers the question kind of from at least our agency.
Yeah, I would say ours is the same as that. As far as coordinating services, you know, I think we've done a pretty good job of still communicating with our community partners. You know, Zoom, this platform has been a godsend, really, that we were able to continue having meetings, continuing working with our local continuum of care, continuing working with our local area networking community. The Family Violence Coordinating Council is still meeting. So we are all still maintaining contact and working together to provide the best services that we can.
And then just from CASA, hopefully none of my board members are on this call, but honestly, I would direct all funding to those who are directly providing the service. For CASA, our volunteers are awesome. Funds coming into our organization help support our advocates, where we have trained staff aboard to help them navigate the tough situations. But without the direct services being funded, there's no way that the children that we serve are able to advance and have that successful life that we advocate for without the direct services being supported. So that's what I would say. Hopefully my board members aren't bad, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, obviously COVID has affected everyone. And, you know, I think the beautiful thing about, especially the nonprofits on this panel, are that, you know, our services are free. We want to make these available to survivors who are in need and not set a limit on, you know, if you can afford what you need. So, you know, the dollars that come in and certainly to the Family Peace Center and to our partner agencies, you know, are used to keep our doors open so we can keep doing the services that survivors so desperately need in our community. And so, you know, we rely heavily on grant writing and donations to be able to provide the services that we provide. But, you know, we do everything that we can to make sure that they're accessible to whomever needs them, whatever their financial situation is, so that there aren't barriers to getting safe.
Okay. And here's a question. How can a person learn about services safely if they're worried about being caught looking for help? Are there safeguards or features that help address the risk?
I know on the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault is our
Umbrella?
umbrella, thank you, Maureen. our umbrella organization where like our funding and our policies and procedures all get funneled through. And I know for their website at casa.org, there is a click out feature. Which is really helpful kind of in that respect if somebody's looking online for that. That's kind of a good safety feature.
I know that technology is a huge issue with people in DV and the perpetrators having a pretty good grasp on it. So I don't know if Casey, Sierra, if there's anything in particular that you're aware of or should caution people about if they're using technology to make a connection.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot with the survivors that we work with, and that's one of the safety planning measures that we put into place is that abusers, many times we find they're very tech savvy, and so you might think that you're sending a confidential email and not recognize or realize that that person also has access to your email, maybe from a different phone or you know, maybe they've had access to your passwords, and those are things that we don't think about. And then we also talk about tracking tools that people put on cell phones and on computers and different things like that. Making sure that survivors understand that once information is put out there, it's not really secure. You know, the internet is great, but it's not perfect, right? It's very flawed. When we work with people, sometimes they can use a safe phone number or, you know, a safe word. We always want to make sure that the phone numbers that they're reaching out to us from are safe and confidential, that they're secure and that they feel safe, that we can leave a voicemail if we need to. And then any calls that we make from our organization, our numbers are blocked. So anytime that we reach out to somebody, it's going to be a blocked number. It's not going to show up Remedies Renewing Lives. So that way that also provides a safety factor. We know, especially during COVID, people are at home with their abusers, and we know that it's more difficult for them to reach out and make that phone call, or reach out and access the services that they need. And if people just show up at our facility, maybe they've said that they could go to the grocery store and they've got a limited amount of time to get away, and they just show up at Remedies, we're going to do what we can to help them and provide services to them as quickly and you know, as confidentially as possible.
Yeah, and I would say similarly for the Family Peace Center, like our website has an exit button that I think just reroutes you to like Google or something generic. So if, you know, someone came into the room and was seeing your screen over your shoulder, you could easily kind of hide that. But we do talk with survivors about, you know, what their circumstances look like. And so we always ask them, you know, for a safe phone number that they can be contacted at, and have that conversation about, you know, if we're going to utilize a Zoom platform, if we're going to utilize email, we want to talk to them about the implications for that. You know, does this person have your password to your phone? Does this person have the password to your email account? And if that's the case, then those things aren't something we're going to want to use to communicate. And so, you know, when I mentioned that we do much of what we can virtually, but for some, the safest option is to come in person, it's often in those instances where, you know, she feels that, you know, her phone might be compromised or her email account might be compromised. And so the safest way for us to work with that person is for her to physically come down here. Maybe she says, or he says, you know, I'm going to the grocery store like Casey mentioned, or I have a doctor's appointment. And that gives us a window of time to work with that person. And that's, you know, really what safety planning is all about. And many of our partner agencies provide that safety planning. Our volunteers can also do some safety planning with that person. And that really means, you know, working with the individual because they know their safety and they know their situation best. And so what resources are available to them? You know, what things do they have at their disposal to kind of work with in an emergency? Who are their safe people? Do they have a safe phone number that they can call? Do they have a bag packed in case they need to leave in an emergency? Things like that. We often have those conversations with survivors, but I would say there isn't a blanket right answer because for every survivor, their situation is unique to them.
I think, again, that also starts with just awareness, because I attended a technology like webinar, and it was amazing to me all the things that are out there, not only with adults, but with kids, things that are on phones and computers that I wouldn't have thought of. And so, it's just being aware that you have to have those extra steps and you have to really be cautious, as the panelists have talked about, because of what's available. Seems like every time there's a safety device, there's a hacker who's finding a way to override that. So it's keeping up to date on those things. Do have a question. Our research has demonstrated that referrals are more likely to be followed through on if there is a person to refer to versus an agency. How might we coordinate that in our community? And is that the work of the Peace Center? Kind of a couple questions in there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say we echo that 100%. In terms of getting survivors to services, if you start here, we can kind of coordinate internally with all of our partner agencies. So we've worked really hard with our partner agency staff to say, who is the right person to call in this instance? What does this look like? And then we actually have a packet for our intake navigators that says, if you're going to refer to X agency, this is the person you call, this is their direct line. You know, this is the form that you need to fill out in advance. This is what you can tell the survivor to expect. Maybe it's up to 48 hours before they might get, you know, notice of an appointment or something like that. So we even talked to the survivor about, if I can get this person on the phone immediately, we can make this referral right away. If that's not the case and they're comfortable signing a release, this person will reach out to them to set that first appointment, and that's what this will look like. And so we're finding with the 50 or so survivors we've already served, just a sense of relief on the survivor's end that, you know, they may have called the same agency that we called, but they just got a general office number. Maybe it's an automated message where they have to punch in a bunch of numbers to get the right person. We try to take that guesswork out of it for survivors because we've worked really closely with these partner agencies. And so I know I can call Erica, I can call Kathy and say, here are the circumstances here going on. Casey, you know, who's the right person in your agency to work with on this instance? Because the survivor has signed that release, I can have that conversation. Or obviously when we're post-COVID and everyone's in the same room, it's literally going to be as easy as, let me walk you down the hall. You know, I have this wonderful advocate, her name is Sarah, and she's going to help you with your safety planning, or she's going to help you with setting up your counseling. And then I'm literally introducing and transferring the trust that survivor has in me as the intake navigator at the Peace Center with the partner agency staff that's located here. Obviously right now, because we're doing a lot of things in sort of a hybrid fashion, that feels a little clunkier, but I think it's still a sense of relief for survivors to know that that we can provide them a direct route to getting what they need instead of just leaving a bunch of voicemails and never knowing if they're going to get to that next step.
Okay. Another question here. Do any of the agencies often work with adult protective services, as our elderly are very vulnerable as well?
I'm really glad that somebody asked that question, because it's a new position that we have created, and it slipped my mind when I was talking about our services. So we just hired an abuse and later life advocate. It's a grant that's funded through the 17th Judicial Court District, and she will be located actually at the Family Peace Center starting on Monday. I think she's actually over there this morning helping set up her furniture. So she will be working with adults who are over the age of 50 who are victims of abuse, including intimate partner violence, but not necessarily only intimate partner violence. That's typically the type of service that Remedies provides, is for people who are victims of intimate partner or family violence. But in this circumstance, we know that elderly people are very vulnerable with caregivers, or, you know, family members that are maybe taking care of them. Maybe they have somebody who is maybe managing their finances and they're not managing them appropriately. And so this advocate will be able to help that person with the services, working with the Ombudsman program, and then also the other programs and services that are provided for the elderly in the community. So we're very excited to have this position available, and we were very excited to be able to hire for this, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to reach a population of the community that we haven't worked very closely with in the past.
There other questions? I was just going to add with RSAC that we're also involved in that adult and later life grant, and that we do see clients for their own abuse as well as significant others. Sometimes it's, you know, grandparents who may be parenting for the first time, a child who's been traumatized, and so they're needing support. Or what we've seen in the last couple of years is 60 and over numbers going up, seeking their own services. These are women that have been abused many years ago and had never disclosed. And in the atmosphere and the attention being given to trauma and violence, sexual and domestic violence, they're beginning to speak out on their own behalf. And so we will also see those clients for any of our current services.
Thank you. So that brings us to time, and we want to respect everybody's time here this morning. If you have additional questions, please send those to me via email, and I will share those out with the panelists. I just want to say thank you, Maureen, so much for leading the panel this morning, and thank you all of the panelists for joining us. This was extremely critical information for us to have, especially working in human services. I will share a little bit of information about some events that we have coming up, especially relevant. On September 29th, we have a sexual harassment recognition and prevention training. Illinois requires an annual training for all employees to train, or all employers rather, to train every employee on recognizing and preventing sexual harassment. So we have information about that I'll share out with you with this presentation copy. So you have that in our next case management events. On December the 16th, we will have another community of practice event on workforce opportunities. We'll share more information with you about that. And then we have a large group training. So if you want to go through that core training on person-centered outcome-based case management, we will be holding that during the month of November. So watch for that information, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
Bye.